Hey everyone, welcome back to some new r/pro revenge stories. I hope you had a great day. In today's episode, Karen has to learn that her position in the company is maybe not as important as she might think. If you are new here, please don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoy the video. The first story is called Karen Has to Learn Her Place. I was working a job that had me operating in one of our offices overseas. We would have business expenses, and those receipts would be in the language of the country we were in, obviously. Those expenses were for things like printer ink, office equipment, cleaning services, marketing costs, all pretty standard stuff. Around this time, we got a new vice president over our region who worked out of the head office in LA. This vice president came up with this brilliant idea to hire a translator to translate all of our receipts to make sure we weren't sneaking in things. Fair enough, however, the issue that arose was that we had to send our expenses to the translator who would translate the receipt, then submit it for reimbursement. The problem was, this translator was a real Karen type. She would demand better scans of the receipts, oftentimes after we had already thrown it away. And she would argue if we really got the best deal on whatever we bought. I remember in one transaction on about $200 of ink cartridges, she asked me why I didn't order online from this common website. I said they were out of stock at the time and we needed the ink, so we bought from a local store. To which she said that I was spending too much money. I said it's none of your concern, your job is to translate the receipt. To which she said if I want her to submit my expenses, I need to be nice to her. I said to her that she needs to learn her place. She's a translator, not a vice president that gets to instruct me what to do. After this encounter, she started being extra picky with my expenses, so one day I came into the office early to call her and try to work things out. She basically told me that I screwed up by getting her mad, and she expected my expense reports to be perfect or she wouldn't submit them unless they were. I told her if she keeps this up, she won't have a job much longer. She laughed and wished me well and hung up. A few months later, we had our annual meeting in LA. After the meeting, we were at a bar and I walked up to our vice president and started up a conversation. I steered the conversation to expenses and asked him how much in monthly expenses did he typically reimburse us for in the country we worked out of. He said about $3,000 to $4,000. I acted surprised and asked, is that all? And he goes, yeah. To clarify, that $3,000 to $4,000 is the typical spend, and he says yeah, it rarely gets above that. So I asked him about how Karen, our translator, is doing. He says she's doing a good job, and I nod my head and I go, how many fraudulent expenses has she caught? It's important to note every employee that was submitting expenses was well paid. They would be really foolish trying to skim some extra dollars via fraudulent expense reports. He goes, what do you mean? Well, you hired her to ensure all the expenses you were reimbursing us for are legitimate, right? Her job is to translate them for you, correct? He says it is, and I asked, so, is it safe to presume you've done that to ensure people aren't submitting fake expenses? He says, you could say that. I smile and asked, so, how much in fraudulent expenses has she caught? He thinks for a moment and goes, I don't think she has caught any. And how much do we pay her? He says it depends on her workload, but between $2,500 and $3,000 a month. I smile and asked, does it make sense to pay someone $3,000 a month to translate $3,000 in receipts? Well, she ensures we aren't getting fraudulent expenses. Well, you said she hasn't caught any in the last 9 months, and the expenses are always between $3,000 and $4,000. So as long as the expenses stay in that range, wouldn't it be safe to assume that the expenses are legitimate? And couldn't you bring on a translator on a contract basis if they get out of hand? He sees my point. And imagine the cost savings. We would probably save over $40,000 a year. That's a good chunk of change, isn't it? The vice president tries to defend his position, but she does a good job. But you could frame this as you've saved us $40,000 a year and created a baseline to judge expenses by. Cutting costs is always good for the bottom line and the end of the year bonuses, isn't it? I knew that a major percentage of a vice president's compensation from the company had to do with the company's margin at the end of the year. The bigger the margin, the bigger the bonus. You can see the twinkle in his eye, and we carry on with the rest of the night. A few weeks later, we get an email from the vice president. He says that we have to submit all our expenses directly to the admin for reimbursement and that we have let go of Karen. What a great way to get revenge on her. Maybe she even learns that she shouldn't try to mess with the people she's working for. The last story is called You Give Away My Number, I Will Destroy Your Life. I had been dating someone for a few months and decided to get an apartment in their hometown. Everything was going fine until I logged into a local chat room, think AOL days, to hopefully make some new friends. A weird username messaged me and said hello and nothing else. A few days later, me and the boyfriend, let's call him Bob, are supposed to meet up for breakfast. When I get there, he has a messenger bag with him. I asked him what he wants to eat and he says he's not hungry. I asked him what's wrong and he pulls out about 20 pages of a chat log from that weird username on the website. In this chat log, there's some very graphic adult stuff that was being discussed by that username. Also in that chat log was my name commenting on it, which I never did. I asked him what this was and, of course, he asked me to tell him what it was. I honestly had no idea and told him so. He broke up with me right there over this. As I stated before, that username had said hello to me and that was it. The chat log was faked and I had no idea why someone would do that. When I got home, crying my eyes out, my phone rang. There was a strange voice on the line saying how that now that I'm single I should go out with them and all sorts of crap. Then the text messages started about wanting to assault me and various other things. It was then revealed that it was the ex of my now ex Bob. I called up Bob and told him what was going on and asked him why he gave my number to his ex. He said I shouldn't have tried to cheat on him with his ex. Again, something that never happened. Up until this, I thought Bob was going to be the person I spent my life with. That obviously didn't happen. Needless to say, this resulted in a police report being filed with pictures of all the text messages and voicemails being given to the police. I almost hurt myself that night over all of the stress. Bob's ex created this fake chat log to try to break us up, which it did, just to try to get him back, which it didn't in the end. That should set the scene. Now let's start with the revenge. My ex-boyfriend Bob was running a computer business. At the time, Windows required CD keys to install. He was building custom computers for people, but he used a key generator to make the keys to install Windows and Microsoft Office. I found out about this and decided to contact Microsoft and the anti-piracy groups and gave them all the information I had. I didn't hear anything more about it, until just before I moved back to my home state, the hammer fell. My ex lost his computer business and was fined over $100,000 for software piracy. He still doesn't know who turned him in, but it cost him everything he had worked for. He was forced to move back in with his parents, sell his car and get a job rating tables. You might want to know why Bob got the brunt of this. Bob gave my contact info to his ex, that started a campaign of harassment by his ex towards me. The police wouldn't do anything because of his uncle being on the force. So Bob giving my phone number out to people and being the instigator and telling them to hit me up, as I later found out, is why he got the brunt of it. I would have rather went after that sleazeball ex of his, but I couldn't get info on him. I should mention that I have done some IT works in the past, that's why I called Microsoft and the anti-piracy groups. I knew what Bob was doing was piracy and it would cost him everything if they dropped the hammer on him, which it did. Wow, that is borderline nuclear revenge, but he deserved it. I hope the other guy also gets what he deserves. And that concludes today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Thanks for watching, I hope you have a great day. Bye bye.